Hey guys, um, hope everyone's doing all right. Happy weekend. Hope everyone's keeping safe. Welcome to the Torah overview. Today is video 5, I think it is. Video 4 in effect. But I didn't follow it up, but today's video 5. And today we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 3. So I'll dive right into it, and then we'll carry on after that. So I'll read the whole chapter, Genesis chapter 3. I think it's got 24 verses, so it shouldn't be that long. And after that, we'll just look at some symbolism, fundamentals, spiritual principles. Probably look at some questions as we go along, and take it from there. Haven't got my papers printed out, so I'm going to read off my computer just in case I keep turning away. Just bear with me. So Genesis chapter 3, complete Jewish Bible, I always say. Now the serpent was more crafty than any wild animal which Adonai God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you were not to eat from any tree in the garden?" The woman answered the serpent, "We may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden. But about the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you are neither to eat from it or touch it, or you will die." The serpent said to the woman, "It is not true that you will surely die, because God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it had a pleasing appearance, and that the tree was desirable for making one wise, she took some of its fruits and ate. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig trees together to make themselves loincloths. Verse 8. They heard the voice of Adonai God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze. So the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Adonai God among the trees in the garden. Adonai God called on the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself." He said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I ordered you not to eat?" The man replied, "The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit from the tree and I ate." Adonai God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman answered, "The serpent tricked me, so I ate." Adonai God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all livestock and wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and eat dust as long as you live. I would also put animosity between you and the woman, and between your descendants and her descendants. He will bruise your head, and you would bruise his heel." To the woman he said, "I will greatly increase your pain in childbirth. You will bring forth children in pain. Your desire will be towards your husband, but he would rule over you." To Adam he said, "Because you listened to what your wife said and ate from the tree, about which I gave you the order, you are not to eat from. I'll read it again. To Adam he said, Because you listened to what your wife said and ate from the tree about which I gave you the order you were not to eat from, the ground is cursed on your account. You will work hard to eat from it as long as you live. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat field plants. You will eat bread by the sweat of your forehead till you return to the ground. For you were taken out of it, you are dust, and you will return to dust. The man called his wife Hava, which means life, because she's the mother of all living. Adonai God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. Adonai God said, "See, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Now to prevent him putting out his hand and taking also from the tree of life, eating and living forever. Therefore Adonai God sent him," which is man, "out of the garden of Eden to cultivate the ground from which he was taken." He started work straight away. So he drove the man out and placed at the east side of the Garden of Eden the Krumvim and flaming sword, which turned in every direction to guard the way of the tree of life. So we see from Genesis 1 that it's quite a very Genesis 3 that's quite an interesting story, a story that we all probably know about, a story that is synonymous with what all faiths call the fall of man. I beg to differ. I call it the fall of women, or it should be called the fall of women, but I mean, no sexism, just a light joke. But we see the three main characters here: the serpent, Eve, and Adam, and then obviously God. But let's look at some of the attributes of this serpent, who was capable of deceiving the woman to eat this fruit. The scriptures describe the serpent as different from any wild animal. So that means, technically, it was a unique animal. I mean, we know the serpent as the snake. I mean, that's what we know it as in this day and age. But spiritually, this serpent is always attributed to Satan, this particular Satan, not just the cobra. So every snake that you see that crawls up and down the place is not Satan, but this particular Satan that robed himself in the image of a snake was a different one, different from any wild animal. The chapter starts with. And another thing about this serpent was, as much as it was different even in the sense that it could walk and it could also talk, because it definitely had a conversation with Eve in the garden, by asking Eve, did God really say? And we know it could walk because after it had successfully convinced Eve to eat from the garden, to eat from the tree of life, when God was cursing him, or when God was placing a curse on the serpent, he said, on your belly you would walk all the days of your life. So that curse won't be to something that's been crawling on its belly anyway. It would have to be something that's upright. and then God now reduces it to that, because I see no point in it being a serpent that was made to crawl, all, on the ground all the days of its life anyway, to be created that one day it's going to grow legs and then just become something different. That wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to evolve into a walking man. So it must have been something that was upright, a different kind of being or living creature that was upright, that could walk, that could talk, that had sight, and God reduced it to that. So part of his attributes was that it was different. It could walk, it could talk, it could have conversation, and it was also in the Garden of Eden. That's strange, because it wasn't outside the Garden of Eden, it was in the Garden of Eden. And then what you have to understand, that shouldn't be too surprising, because I think it was Genesis 2 that said, all after God had created all the creatures from the dust of the earth, he brought them to man so that man could name them. So if we're wondering why was the serpent in the Garden of Eden, it could have been one of those things where it came so that man could name it, and man named it the serpent. But at that point, whilst it was in the Garden of Eden, Lucifer, or Satan, who we now know is the real deceiver, embodied it and used it as an instrument of craftiness to put his own agenda forward, or acted like an imposter, or so one of the questions that I had, after this, sort of trying to get my head around that, was, do you really think that it was the spirit of Satan that took over the snake, or was the snake a physical form of Satan? Like, don't know if you understand that. Was the snake a snake, and then the spirit of Satan came in it? Or, if it was upright, was it really not a serpent at that point, but the physical appearance of Satan? How caricature we look at Satan. The world describes Satan with horns and nose. Was it that, or was it really a snake? Do we know? These are things we could never know, and these are things we can't get our head around. We leave it as open mystery, but it's good to think about it, what appearance it is in. And so at times you actually could be able to identify evil, know evil, see evil, and be able to run from evil. Well, in my opinion, I think Satan was trying to be like God by trying to create that fake appearance, that he always does, like just trying to, make things that are fake real. So there's nothing that Satan will give you, or Satan has the power to give things to people, but at the end of what he gives you is destruction. At the end of what he gives you is disaster. He doesn't give you something and not take back from you. So there's nothing that he gives you that is sustainable. There's always a hidden agenda or hidden trick to bring an end or bring destruction for everything he hands over. So if he hands over with one hand, he wants to take back with two hands. And we could look at it, because look, he tried to tell Adam and Eve, he sort of had the nerves to tell Adam and Eve that God is literally a liar. When he asked Eve, did God really say you shouldn't eat? And she said, oh yes, we could eat from the trees of the garden, but the tree in the middle of the garden we shouldn't touch or eat. No, he said, no, that's not the case. That if you eat any of it, you wouldn't die, but you surely just become like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. We also know that, as I said, the serpent was in the garden anyway. And for me, I've always thought that the Garden of Eden was created as sort of a physical realm of what the heavenly realm was, because it was where God just came in the evening to chill with Adam, have a stroll, have a talk, and that's like how heaven was, heaven is a place where God wants us. So the kingdom of heaven, as Jesus used to describe it in his days, is a place where we'll chill with God. We'll worship God. We'll bask with God in His glory. It will be a place that's holy and a righteous place, and there'll be no sin and there'll be no unrighteousness, and just in case you forget, what was happening in Eden at this point was a parallel to what had happened in heaven, because scripturally they had told us in the past as well. I mean, at this point it hadn't, but going further into the scriptures, it had told us that Satan, Lucifer, was an archangel, and he was casted out of heaven, into earth. So really this is a parallel to that, and if Eden be, so I'm presuming he was casted out of heaven onto earth even before Adam was formed, because it wasn't after Adam was formed that the scriptures tell us that Lucifer was casted out of heaven. So it must have been before the fall of man, or the fall of the creation of man. So this whole scenario that happened in heaven years before we were even aware now begins to replay itself on earth, where Satan comes up again, takes on the image of a snake and tries to trick God's creation, and then God comes down, after Satan has successfully done it. God comes down and then cast Satan out of the garden to walk on its belly forever and ever. And we'll look at that as we go along. So this whole scenario is what Christians sort of call the fall, as I did mention at the start of the video, when man's relationship with God is broken and sin enters sort of into the world, which is the reason why the Savior, Jesus Christ, or the Messiah, would had to come, because there had to be that reconciliation between God and His creation, because sin, and we can't comprehend the righteousness of God in our carnal mind. I spoke in the last video about how people just drop the word holy, holy, holy up and down. You can't comprehend the righteousness of God. It's wholly beyond comprehension. It's a light that is too much for even our physical eye to stare into. It's righteousness, total unblemishedness, like total pureness and purity, so, and it accommodates no sin, it accommodates no uncleanness, it accommodates no spectacle of filth or of unrighteousness at all. It doesn't. So yeah, Christians normally call it the fall. However, the Jews or the Hebrews, they think this whole set of events presents man with the ability to sort of make his own choices, leaving each man to work out his own salvation, in a way, and that's what it is. So that's much about with the serpent. So literally, what were the things that happened in the garden after that? So the serpent goes up to the woman, and he literally just asks her a question. It does ask him a question, because all it said was, "Did God really say?" That was all he asked her, and it must have been a case where they probably was having previous conversation, because someone can't just come up to you and say, "Did God really say?" There must have been a precedence to that conversation, which obviously we're not made aware of, but we just know that the serpent was close enough to the woman. He didn't say he shouted to the woman, he just said he said to the woman. So there must have been some close proximity between them. There must have been a conversation that led up to that, but this was the part of the conversation that was significant. Did God really say? That's all he asked the woman. and and the woman just turns around and say, we may eat from the fruit of the trees in the garden, but the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you are neither to eat from it or touch it. Now, all God said was, you are not to eat from it. There was nowhere that God said, you mustn't touch it. I mean, if you go back into Genesis 2, when he gave Adam that instruction, he didn't say you shouldn't touch from it. He just said you shouldn't eat from it, because if you eat from it, you will surely die. Now, we're not sure whether it was Adam, because Eve wasn't there when that instruction was given, so we're not sure if it was Adam who passed on that instruction, incorrectly, or it was Adam that even added to it. Or so, so in fairness, we can't really blame Eve, and we can't say she lied. But the serpent, in his craftiness, know that you remember the serpent itself could call Satan. What I'm saying, so I know we're calling it the serpent, but serpent wasn't embodied. Satan had embodied the serpent. So, and we know that Satan even knows the scriptures, because after Jesus finished fasting his 40 days and 40 nights, he took Jesus into the wilderness and started quoting into scriptures to him, asking Jesus to do serious things, or series of things, if he knows the Son of God, and he was using scriptures to back it up. So Satan does really know the scriptures. So there was nothing new. The fact that it was quoting the scriptures is just like the woman didn't guard herself properly and was open to the deceit. So also the tree and its fruit. What were the qualities of the tree and its fruits? The tree of knowledge. All we know was that the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that the fruits were delicious, because it says the fruits was pleasing to them. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it had pleasing appearance, and the tree was desirable for making one wise, she took some. So there was three things she saw. She saw that the tree was good for food. First of all, that means she must have been looking at it prior to that time. It was pleasing to her appearance. The fruit, if you see the process of how fruit gets ripened on a tree, you notice the different stages that it goes through. It doesn't just become ripe all of a sudden. So if you're living in an area where sort of a mango tree is growing, and you see how the mango fruits they sort of grow and become ripe, red. You first of all see it spring out, and you see it growing bigger. When it's green, it's very unripe. It's not pleasing to the eye at that time. The minute it becomes to, it's full and it's ripe and it gets to get bigger, you begin to see it change color, and this takes a process of days, gradual days, and then when it begins to change color and it starts to look pleasing to the eye. So, but I remember back then we used to climb up the mango tree, even as it's sort of trying to, the fruits are trying to get ripe, and we used to try and cover it with leaves so that only us sees it, and no one else in the compound will see it before they pluck it before we get there. And that's what she would have done. So she saw it was good for food, she saw it was pleasing in appearance, and that the tree obviously the fruit would make her, eating fruit would make her wise and give her knowledge, which really tells us that Eve was just seeking for knowledge, nothing else, and obviously she found out that not all quest for knowledge is good knowledge, or not all knowledge that we seek for is good knowledge, which is something that is applicable in this day and age. So she ate some, and she gave some to eat. They didn't say the proximity again. They just said it was where she could have walked across the garden to go and give it to him. She could have just, we don't know. Well, one thing about verse 8, it sort of intrigues me a bit, Verse 8 says, we heard the voice of Adonai God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze. So man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Adonai God amongst the trees in the garden. And it intrigues me again, the same way we weren't sure whether the serpent was an embodiment of Satan, or it was just the spirit of Satan that was in the the serpent was a physical embodiment of Satan, or it was just the spirit of Satan that was in the serpent. When they said God was walking in the garden, it's another open mystery, because the Bible tells us that God is spirit, and God can't be part spirit and part man, because he says, I am God, I change it not. So again, it's another open mystery. It's not one of those things where we could just put an evangelist, what to call that word? I don't know, a sort of Christian spin on, evangelical. I can't even say that word. Always twist tongues. Evangelistic spin on, and just say it's Christ. We don't know. We really don't know. Was it God? Was it Jesus? Was it Spirit? Was it figurative speech? We never know. But one thing we do know is there's a lot of figure of speech in the Bible, and it's always too easy to put a simplistic sort of interpretation or spin on these things. But for me, again, it just doesn't cut. As I said, I do know God doesn't change, and God wouldn't be part spirit and part man, and then turn around in the Bible and say, I am a spirit, and those who worship me will worship me in spirit and in truth. That's why just mere words doesn't, there has to be a spiritual connection to sort of get a spiritual connection to hook up with God. I was trying to find a word. Anyway, so God asks the man, where are you? And the man told him, I hid because obviously I was naked. And obviously they weren't really naked, because at that point they had sort of realized they were naked, so they covered themselves with fig tree. But to man, he still thought he was naked, because he was aware at that point of the sin that he had committed. And God asked the man, which is Adam, who told you you were naked? You must have eaten from the fruit in the middle of the garden, which I've instructed you not to eat. Man obviously turns around and say, look, the woman you gave me this fruit, and she is my wife. So if my wife gives me something, I can't say, why are you giving it to me? You're my wife. Remember, it says, for this reason, man will leave his father and his mother and become one with his wife. So his wife, so it's one. So she's giving it to me as my wife that you brought for me. God brought this woman to me. So I'm accepting it. But obviously, so there wasn't no wrong really in what Adam had done, because it was his wife, even though he knew that, he could have chastised his wife and said, oh, why did he take it? Oh, I don't know what I'm going to tell God now. But I mean, he could have, would have, should have. It's all too late now. So Adam blames the woman. The woman obviously blames Satan. And then God, well pissed off, he lays the curse on Satan, as we all know. You be cursed beyond, cursed beyond all wild animals. You crawl on your belly, you eat dust. Put enmity between the woman and you, between your seed and the woman's seed. This is significant again, where he says, I think it's. Yeah, and God said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cost more than all livestock and wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and eat dust as long as you live. I will put animosity between you and the woman, and between your descendant and her descendant. He would bruise your head, and you would bruise his heel. Now, for me, he will bruise your head, and you would bruise his heel. It's a Messianic prophecy, as far as I'm concerned. At that point, God knew he's going to punish the man, but he knew that he's still going to bring, he's saying to Satan, I'm not just going to let you run riot. This same human being, this same creation that you have tricked to go against my word, I'm going to bring a lion out of this same creation. I'm going to put animosity between your descendants and where is it? Yeah. I will put animosity between you and the woman, and between your descendant and her descendant. So obviously, descendant means a line of children that woman had, which obviously came to the line of the Messiah, and that surely Messiah would come and bruise the head of Satan. Having said that, he would bruise the head of the Messiah, some of the descendants, not necessarily Messiah, but some of the creation of God. And then he also cusses the woman, which I think the woman got off lightly as far as I'm concerned. Just saying, oh well, I'll increase your pain in childbirth. With great pain would you bring forth children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he would rule over you. And she got off lightly. And then for man, he said, because you have listened. He even said something, just because you listen, like you're not really meant to listen. This is your wife. You said we're one. He said, just because you've listened, that the ground is cursed for your sake. You would work as long as you live. The ground will produce thorns and thistles for you. Which, as men, we really experience, because we really have to graft. We have to graft. Whatever the line of duty you're in, you have to graft. To break even, or to make ends meet, or even to supersede what should be just a break free of a hand to mouth kind of thing. And by the sweat of your brow you would eat. And then he finally reminds man that, look, I made you from dust, and to that dust you will return. And then God, sort of sends man out of the Garden of Eden. Again, he puts an angel there to block man, so that man doesn't come back. Before that, he said, look, and this is symbolic as well. When I was asking whether God God was walking in the garden, in terms of was God really walking, or was it just his spirit that sort of hovered over the earth, as it said in Genesis 1:1. Was God like physically like walking, in the garden? But this sort of now puts some flesh in it, where he says, God puts the man out of the angels and puts an angel towards the east. But then also says, like, a man has known. Before that, he says, what does it say? Before that, it says, man, in order to prevent man from being like, which is the last verse that says, God said, man has become like one of us. Again, he's using us, and he's saying like one of us, knowing good and evil. So he's saying like, and that sort of it aligns with I think it's Genesis 1:20, I think it's 24 or so, when they say, let us create man, so in our own image. I mean, you can make of what you think of it, but for me, it's one of those open mysteries again, that even though it correlates, it still, it still gives you much to think about, wrap your head around, to come through the correct meaning of that. So he sends man out of the garden, and then before that, remember I was talking about him, that prophetic saying, and him saying that he's gonna bruise the descendants will bruise the head of each other. But then as he was making reconciliation here again, he still, before he sent them out, he still made a covering for man out of animal skin. Now, the symbolism of this is the fact that at that point, up until that point, there had been no report of the death of animals in the garden. Even though Adam sinned and he made, Adam and Eve sinned and they made fig leaves for themselves. There was nowhere up until that point where, the Bible was telling us that they were killing animals and sacrificing the blood. Even at that point, plants were what man was meant to be feeding on. But God, before he left, or before he sent them out, God made a covering for them with animal skin. So one thing we have to know is that it wasn't dead animal skin. He would have had to kill animals. He would have to have killed an animal, skin that animal, and use that skin as a covering for men. And in terms of killing the animal, he shedded blood. He shedded the blood of the animal, which is symbolic of blood sacrifice, which shows that it's only the innocent blood of an animal, in that respect, or of a lamb, that could atone, or the shedding of innocent blood that could atone for one's sin. We can't cover up for sin ourselves, So even the fig leaves that he sowed wasn't enough in God's sight to cover up for the sin. You can't sin against God and then forgive yourself and cover yourself from, God has to make all the atonement through, God can't make that atonement, but that atonement has to be made through innocent, by the innocent shedding of blood of an innocent animal. And in fairness, it shows the first sign of redemption by the shedding of blood. As I said, man can't atone for himself. An animal skin in itself was technically just covering the sin within us. So I have a few final questions just before I go this week. If Eve lied before eating the fruit, because remember I was saying to you that she said to Satan, we shouldn't touch the tree nor eat from it, and God only said you shouldn't eat from it. So if it was a lie, or if she added onto it, or if it was the fact that Adam gave her the wrong instruction, either way, it wasn't the instruction that was given to her anyway. But let's assume it was a lie, that she, out of her own sort of naivety, just wanted to flow a little bit more, added those lines onto it. Where did she get the idea, if I put it in the easiest term, to do that from? Does that mean that even within the first creation of humanity, the first man and the first woman, there was, because lying is bad, there was good and evil, even before the fall of man, because at that point she hadn't eaten. So does that mean there was good and evil in her? Does that mean she had the capacity to lie? Is what is worth thinking about. Or as a case where evil sort of pre-existed even before the creation of man? Could it be that the enlightenment we were talking about, the light that was created in Genesis 1:1, or Genesis 1:3, I think it's 1:3, that light that separated the darkness, could it be that darkness, the energy of darkness, is just part of what we're created as human beings? Again, I don't know if I sort of articulated it properly, but then you should just try and understand, and then try and wrap your hands around it, or read the scripture for yourself, and then just babble over those thoughts, and come up with an answer, and let me know perchance what your answer is, or what your opinion is, or what you think is the right response to that. It's been a pleasure and a delight having you again. Another 40 odd minutes today. Tomorrow we're going to do Genesis 4 and probably 5 as well, just so we could sort of speed up the pace of this game. And until we speak again, then I want to wish you all a good weekend in advance. Stay safe. Good night. God bless.